So, if Iran's mullahs or Iraq's Saddam Hussein decide to use terrorists to attack the continental United States, they likely turn to bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is among the Islamic groups recruiting increasingly skilled professionals such as computer and communications technicians, engineers, pharmacists, and physicists, as well as Ukrainian chemists and biologists, Iraqi chemical weapons experts, and others capable of helping develop WMD, weapons of mass destruction. So, the rules of war between nation states is that at the extreme end of WMD is nukes, then you have biological weapons, then you have chemical biological weapons. It's the policy of the United States and other nation states that if you use a chemical weapon against us, we can nuke you. Okay? In terms of continuum of force, which is actually applied to civilian police forces. You know, I can verbally order you to do something, you don't comply, I can physically restrain you, use, a taser, use mace, or kill you. It's a continuum of force.
But those same rules require us to declare war before we attack foreign countries.
Correct. Right. Exactly. Not have little police actions like Vietnam or Afghanistan or whatever, right?
Or invading Iraq.
Or invading, yeah. So, Al-Qaeda this is still quoting from that report. Al-Qaeda poses the most serious terrorist threat to U.S. security interests, for Al-Qaeda's well-trained terrorists are actively engaged in a terrorist jihad against U.S. interests worldwide. Al-Qaeda's expected retaliation for the U.S. cruise missile attack against Al-Qaeda's training facilities in Afghanistan in August of 1998 could take several forms of terrorist attack in the nation's capital. Al-Qaeda could detonate a Chechen-type building buster bomb at a federal building. Now, what a building buster bomb is a suitcase nuke.
Where did they get those?
Well,
100 of them disappeared in Russia.
Yes, right. So that's why they're tripping about Chechens, right? Especially with Boston, that's why that came up.
And we gave them Stinger missiles too.
Yeah. A horrendous scenario, consonant with Al-Qaeda's mindset, would be its use of a nuclear suitcase bomb against any number of targets in the nation's capital. Bin Laden allegedly has already purchased a number of nuclear suitcase bombs from the Chechen mafia. Al-Qaeda's retaliation, however, is more likely to take the lower fist form of bombing one or more U.S. airliners with time bombs. Yusuf was planning simultaneous bombings of 11 U.S. airliners prior to his capture. Whatever form an attack may take, bin Laden will most likely retaliate in a spectacular way for the cruise missile attack against his Afghan camp in '98. Suicide bombers belonging to Al-Qaeda's Martyrdom Battalion could crash land an aircraft packed with high explosive C4 and Semtex into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency, or the White House. Ramzi Yousef had planned to do this against the CIA headquarters. Now, this is still in the report. They got a 99 with this graphic opposite. Okay, so on the basis of this report, prior to 9/11, 3 of the 19 were put on 24-hour surveillance. So they actually knew. And were actually trying to do something to stop it.
That's scary.
Okay, so they were either lost or surveillance was dropped 24 hours before the attack. The person that could say which is dead. Okay, the report is evidence that there was sufficient cause for concern and prior knowledge enough to place it, because, place people under surveillance.
Well, those people were training at these small airports?
Well, no, they were training with the small airports,
and they
etc.
got reported from the people that own those places.
Yeah.
They didn't go after them. I don't understand why.
Okay, so whether you believe the government was inept or set up 9/11 as a pretext for some larger agenda, whatever, focus is still not on terrorists who were white supremacists who, before 9/11, had the largest body count on the continental United States. in terms of being dangerous. Okay, so will the government protect you against those terrorists and who are arming themselves with gun explosives, chemical weapons, the whole ricin thing? Another crouching tiger, hidden dragon thing. So, after 9/11, while everybody else was grounded, a private jet with presidential authorization was allowed to fly around the country picking up members of the bin Laden family, Bush family business partners, before the FBI could question them regarding their brother or relative Osama and flew them out of the country. This is reported in the Washington Post. In one of bin Laden's kids, who wrote a book, Growing Up Bin Laden, he basically talked about how bin Laden was flown himself. He was a CIA asset, and they were picked up in Saudi Arabia and flown to Tora Bora. And he was saying, Mom was pissed. They left the palace. They moved to a cave. Doesn't even matter that the cave had carpets.
Well, we armed them in the Russian Afghani war in the first one.
Well, right. He was a CIA asset because he was helping us against the Soviets in Afghanistan. Yeah. This was documented in terms of movies in Charlie Hart's War. Basically, Congress just refused to fund, basically building schools to educate women, keeping the Taliban out. We didn't do that. Taliban came back, etc. So 2002, Halle Berry becomes the first African-American woman to receive an Academy Award for Best Actress, and Denzel becomes only the second African-American man to win Best Actor. In the same year. George Bush awards comedian and actor Bill Cosby and baseball player Hank Aaron the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Reparations. Perennial issue. I don't know if this CNN link works, but attorneys for a former law student who discovered evidence linking U.S. corporations to the slave trade filed a federal lawsuit Tuesday that could seek billions of dollars in reparations for the descendants of slaves in Africa, African Americans. Filed in federal court in Brooklyn, names Fleet Boston Financial, the railroad firm CSX, and the Aetna Insurance Company, and promises to name up to 100 additional corporations at a later date. It accuses the companies of conspiracy, human rights violations, and unjust enrichment from their corporate predecessors' role in the slave trade and conversion of the value of the slaves' labor into their profits. These corporations that benefited from stealing people, from stealing labor, from forced breeding, from torture, from committing tremendous, horrendous acts, there's no reason why they should be able to hold on to assets they've acquired through such horrendous acts, said Deirdre Farmer Paleman, the main plaintiff in the lawsuit. She learned of Aetna's role in insuring slaves in legal classes and asked Aetna for old policies documenting the practice which Aetna provided to her. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 35 million African Americans. It seeks financial payments for the value of stolen labor and unjust enrichment and calls for the companies to give up illicit profits. Plaintiffs are also seeking compensatory and punitive damages. All right. So, as an example, these arguments for reparations. So, if you're a corporation, it has already been defined that you're a person by the Supreme Court, even though you can lead to, the deaths of human beings, et cetera, you're not put to death, as an example. But you are responsible, if you're a corporation, for the debts and the things that your predecessor, that is, whatever company you acquired, did. So that's the legal basis for reparations. So basically, then, what Aetna says, so literally there might be a movie on the list that I talk about where it's called The Confederate States of America. It's a satire based on historical fact. And basically, what it's based on is, what if the South had won the Civil War? What would America look like? All right? And so it's run like a documentary. And so, within that scenario then, Harriet Tubman gets executed. Lincoln is run out of office to Canada or imprisoned. Then you have insurance companies who are running ads. So this movie came out in the late 90s, early 2000s as a spoof, but it's a real spoof. So it has, it's set up like a television documentary. And so you have black scholars from Canada talking about slavery, right? And in between, the commercial breaks are like insurance companies who are based like State Farm or Aetna or whatever, who are basically protect your property, your car, your boat, your house, your slave. Okay? So when I was talking about, for example, in Texas, slaves are property. If somebody else kills your slave, destroys your property, you can not only have them arrested, but they can be put to death by the legal processes. If you kill your slave, an insurance company will pay you the value of the slave. Right? And that was Aetna. That was, so if you get that idea, right? So she's saying, look, okay, so slavery's over, but you profited from that. Harvard University profited from importing slaves. It doesn't matter that slavery is illegal. You basically, did I show you the profit on slavery?
No. Yeah, but the South couldn't win the Civil War. They didn't have the industrial base to do that.
No. Right. Details.
Okay. I mean, you're stretching on believability there.
Okay. Admitted. Acknowledged. Profit on a slave. This comes from Claude Anderson's book, Dirty Little Secrets About Black History. Okay? 1,500% profit on a slave. Okay? So let's say a slave like Aaron, you could get $800 to $1,800 for him. Okay?
That's Civil War.
And Civil War dollars.
That's worth,
right?
It's worth 100 times more.
Yeah. Let's say that a woman could go for $900. Now she's cheaper because she may or may not pick cotton as fast, but you can breed her, i.e., rape her, sell her children, and make money on the children without feeling any guilt about that. All right? But let's take that out of the equation for a second. Right? All you have to pay them, is not really pay, is feed them your table scraps and whatever they can hunt at night, and hand-me-down clothes for room and board. Meanwhile, whatever they produce in labor, you get free as profit. Okay? So you might have put out $1,800 or $800 or $900, but over the life of the slave, that means that each slave is worth upwards to $4 million of profit over the life of the slave.
All over it. That kind of sounds like today's NCAA.
Okay, well, it does sound like today's NCAA. That's why, the brother wrote the book about $1 million slaves, in terms of athletes, right? Because, if you're a college athlete, you aren't getting paid, okay? But the university's making tons of money in television rights, et cetera, Nike endorsements, whatever.
That's crazy.
Right? So part of the piece here, in terms of looking at the economics of slavery, even if you didn't own slaves yourself, you could profit by supplying plantations with goods and services, and you benefited because there was free labor. You did. All right? So part of the logic of the reparations is saying, okay, what would that look like if we got reparations? So first, because remember of the axiology, you have to prove that you had a slave ancestor. And then, okay, so that's kind of the logic. Look at all these companies. Who's going to, you go in a lawsuit, you go after the deepest pocket. So insurance, banks.
Trillions of dollars.
Yeah, trillions of dollars, right? Trillions of dollars. So, yeah. If you do the math, and I have, let's say the value of having a slave ancestor on the low end is 800 grand. Multiply 800 grand times 35 million. That's a fair chunk, if not more, than the gross domestic product of the United States. Okay? So, what's at stake here? So, the legal precedent for reparations, it's there. But what's going to happen and what happened here? So, in a statement, go back to slide, thank you. CSX said the suit is wholly without merit and should be dismissed. The claimant named CSX because slave labor was used to construct portions of some U.S. rail lines under the political legal system in place more than a century before CSX was formed in 80. So, reparations poll. CNN does a reparations poll. 9 out of 10 white respondents said the government should not make cash payments to slave descendants, while 6% said it should. Among black respondents, 55% said the government should make cash payments and 37% said it should not. The poll surveyed 1,000 adults, 820 of them white, 146 black. Like, wait, you couldn't find more black folks? The poll had a margin of error of plus or minus 9 percentage points for black respondents and plus or minus 4% for white respondents. The percentages differ because of the difference in the number of people surveyed. Yeah, only 1,000 in your CNN. You only find 146 black people out of 1,000. Where'd you sample?
Yeah, those numbers don't seem right.
The same people were asked if corporations that made profits from slavery should apologize to African Americans. Among blacks, 60% said they should, while 23% they should not. Among whites, 32% said they should, and 62% said they should not. Clinton didn't want to apologize for slavery. This is all, during about the same time. 3/4 of black respondents said the company should set up scholarship funds for descendants of slaves, and 20% said that they should not. So among white respondents, 35% said they favored the scholarship funds, 61% said they were opposed. So here we have the same country kind of like divided on the issue along really, classically interesting lines. But all right, let's say if you have a calculator that goes that high, let's say that 800,000 per descendant of slavery gets paid in reparations, which is a fair piece of change. What would happen? All right, so this is why I favor a universal admission to college as reparations. Okay, like high school, free, like high school, and a constitutional rewrite. Because the legal precedent for paying reparations exists. They did that partially for some Jews. They did that for Japanese citizens who were interned.
Protect against lawsuits.
You would need a referendum to do that.
You would need a referendum to do that.
That's 2/3 of the
Right.
vote of the United
Right.
States.
Okay. So the piece is, could you trust the United States to have the honor to do that?
I'm down.
Well, some of us are down, but Could you trust them to do that? That's doubtful. So what's easier? Because I mean, yes, I would love a check for 800 grand. Okay, I would love it. But is that going to happen? Probably not. Right? And there's another piece that, you know, yeah, I'm for reparations. I'll say that on the record. Yes, I'm for reparations, but, you know, Obama ain't going to give me my reparations check, no matter how much Mitt Romney says that, you know, I'm going to get a giveaway from the president. No. Obama's not down with reparations. Right? Here's what Claude Anderson pointed out, and what I mentioned a little last week. Black America, in the mid-2000s, basically had a discretionary income of close to $900 billion, which made us, in the mid-21st century, the 9th largest economy in the world.
California?
Behind California.
Oh, okay.
No, Black America by itself. Discretionary income. That is the money you don't have to spend beyond bills. Okay? CDs, clothes, cars, food, entertainment, electronics, video game, whatever. Not books. Discretionary income. Actually, books is part of it. But it turned out we were spending billions on cars and electronics, but only 300 million on books that year. Significant fraction of $1 billion. Right? So, what Anderson pointed out is that 99 cents out of every one of these dollars goes out of the community, never to return. A penny stays in.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay? So the way we've been socialized, that reparations check is probably not going to go into the stock market or real estate or anything that replicates. It'll be gone at an astounding rate, leaving only 1% of it. Now, that's not what I would do, but hey. So there are arguments for reparations, right? Legal precedent is there, right? So Ogletree. Charles Ogletree was one of the lead attorneys in the lawsuit who wrote sections of the South African Constitution. The rationale behind the lawsuit is simple. The legal precedent has already been established by Holocaust survivors, Japanese internment, and other classes of people where liberty has been denied by nation states or corporate entities. Okay? Chattel slavery qualifies as the same class of wrong. The issue is not whether you yourself did the wrong or your ancestors did. A corporate person inherits the debts, liabilities, and assets of his parent, just like a child would. The effect that chattel slavery still persists in systemic patterns of discrimination, as well as disproportionate advantage conferred by the wealth of slavery. So, $1.3 trillion, as an example, divided among 35 million African Americans is only 37 grand each, which given the amount, which is, if you think about the amount given Tuskegee survivors, is only double or triple that award, but that's from 3 companies. Okay? The United States government has received greater benefits from slavery for much longer.
The Japanese internment people only got 30,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're getting shortchanged.
So in doing the math, could be argued that the only reason limited reparations have been paid to Jews and the Japanese because the liability was limited and there was some PR value in increased trade. Japanese reparations were limited due to the fact of survivors, but it was more than was paid for at Tuskegee. So let's say the original 40 acres and a mule cost out today in today's dollars $800,000 multiplied by 35 million African Americans. That figure. Apply the Tuskegee payout formula of 1/160th. So 5,000 per capita who can prove they had a slave as an ancestor. So the obvious move would be to disqualify some part of the class using the precedent set in voting. Rather than check the box, you have to have a paper trail to prove you have a slave ancestor, right? I mean, in terms of logistics. Okay, so if you Tuskegee down the lawsuit to 37K, you get an amount of $200. I'm just saying these are already legal principles that have been used to limit awards, right? So, what is more likely, given the record of honoring commitments to African Americans, is that pretty much they'll do nothing, which is about what's happened with reparations. Doesn't make it a dead issue. Just showing you in terms of looking at economic inequities, deserved payments, et cetera, there's ways of, these are systemic forms of discrimination, which when I started at the top of the class saying, look at the state of Black America, those economic inequities are built in within the system. So even getting a windfall, like a reparations check or winning the lottery, you're still going to have some basic inequities you have to be aware of. Okay? So even if I accepted a check for $750,000, 99% would be back in white hands inside of a year. They can count on that.
It'd be easier to get that free education because you can prove that they were disenfranchised.
Yes, I would send me to medical school or something like that, right?
I mean, those tests were written by white people for white people for all that time.
So Powernomics, this is basically Claude Anderson. And he basically talks about plans for reparation and economic self-sufficiency. There are performance artists like Damali Ayo, who talks about do-it-yourself reparations, where she actually takes a kind of comedic approach. She basically had, in her art installation, she has white people basically panhandling for reparations, which then they give to a random black person. Do-it-yourself reparations. In other news, 2003, the Bengals hired defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis as the football team's new head coach. He, along with Tony Dungy and Herman Edwards, are the only African-American coaches in the NFL at the time. Montgomery bus, on which Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, is restored and put on display at Henry Ford Museum. Oh, well, that's a little irony. In Dearborn, given Henry Ford. Supreme Court issues 2 decisions in 2 cases, Grutter-Bollinger and Gratz v. Bollinger, which challenged the use of race in admission policy at the University of Michigan's Law School and the Undergraduate College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. The court upholds the concept of race as one of many factors in university admission, but rejects approaches that fail to examine each student's record on an individual basis. Now, affirmative action works in 2 places, both hiring and school admissions. In hiring, the beneficiaries of affirmative action have largely been white women, according to the data. In school admissions,
that was this case too, the Michigan case. That was a white woman that was denied.
Right. So part of what happened with Michigan, affirmative action policies in admissions have never, ever increased the minority population of a college, and in this case, the law school, by more than 10%. Now, ethnic minorities make up more than 10% of the United States population. Okay, so affirmative action has never increased the minority population in any college and university anywhere near 10%, and only did it in Michigan for a term or 2 just before this case was done. And then only for the law school. So it's a weak remedy. Carol Moseley Braun, nation's first African-American senator, announced her candidacy for the president, but she drops out in 2004. Gulf War II. So, weapons of mass destruction, the liberation of Iraq. So, where exactly did Saddam come from and who put him there?
It's a Sunni. We put him there.
Yeah. So, Iraqi oil for Iraqi people, 3 cents a gallon, but you can't get the oil out because tanker insurance is through the roof. Business contracts for your friends, that is Brown and Root, Halliburton, Cheney.
No bid contracts.
No bid business contracts, right? Yo Child Left Behind, $863 billion spent on the war, so for thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of Iraqi lives have bought. Exactly what? So there's a website talked about the cost of war back then. So that money would have paid for, this is then, 14 million public school teachers for a year, 260 million people with health care for a year, most of the country, 140 million college scholarships for a year.
That's more than people.
Okay, those were based on a war cost of $263 billion. Subsidized 1 million housing units for poor family, more than half of people in poverty working full time. 37 million kids in Head Start. Insure 171 million children for a year. 13 million for college scholarships. 4-year college scholarships. So even if you looked at the war as an investment, what security is it buying? If it's revenge, have we achieved payback? So, as an example, the 2004 presidential election results, and if you match that with pre-Civil War free states versus slave states, it's clearly red states are the pro-slavery states. The blue states are not. So that presidential selection. That first quote is from Star Wars. Exit polls gave the election to Kerry. Then, if that happened, then the vote has to be changed. Can the government be trusted to count the vote accurately? If it doesn't go the way it should? Study well the ways of the adversary. So voting machine fraud is only one method. 4 million votes in Iowa when Iowa doesn't have 4 million voters. How does that happen? So the message behind the message. The history behind what they tell you is the history. So as an example, I think I have a graphic coming up. Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. So Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib. If you mistreat citizens of color, will you not also mistreat prisoners of color? Many of the soldiers are from the South. Iraqis are brown people. Torture? Sure. We're used to that. It's a tradition. This is a picture of Donald Rumsfeld on the left shaking hands with Saddam Hussein in '83 as part of the Reagan administration. So the difference between a strongman and a dictator is somebody that is the United States, doesn't like. A strongman is somebody we do like. And Saddam was a strongman, because here you have U.S. officials shaking hands with him. How does he become evil in the 90s?
Well, we liked him because we didn't want a Ayatollah to be running Iraq. That was during the Iran war, so right. we were supplying him with weapons.
So, Saddam had been a CIA asset since '58. CIA assisted his coming to power in '68. Relations had been normalized in 1984 with the shaking of hands. What happened 7 years later in the Gulf War? Well, a historical W. We're waist deep in the big muddy in the sandbox, and the big fool said to push on. It's a folk song, Pete Seeger. So, Condoleezza Rice becomes Secretary of State, first African-American woman to hold that post. August 30th, Katrina hits the Gulf Coast, taking an estimated 1,700 lives. The vast majority of the deaths in Louisiana included heavily African-American in New Orleans. Katrina, of course, does not just affect African Americans, but those without access to resources. It becomes an example of multiple systemic failure, which continues to this day, where people cannot return to their homes because the city, state, and feds have not built the infrastructure necessary to return to their homes. So Spike Lee's When the Levee Broke, a Requiem in 4 acts. So from the HBO site, as the world watched in horror, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in August of 2005. Like many who watched that unfolding drama on television news, director Spike Lee was shocked not only by the scale of the disaster, but by the slow, inept, and disorganized response to the emergency and recovery effort. He was moved to document this tragedy When the Levees Broke, in 4 acts. So basically, looking at those websites, you can basically delve into that history. The biggest it was the biggest national disaster to hit American soil, but now with global warming and Hurricane Sandy, increased tornadoes, powerful tornadoes.
Watch out for fires this year.
Watch out for fires.
California's going to be in bad shape this summer.
Coretta Scott King. So there's a whole piece we could do on institutional isms with Katrina and other disasters, but I'll save it for another year. Coretta King, Ed Bradley died in 2006. The National Memorial for Martin Luther King gets built, groundbreaking. James Brown dies, King of Soul. That's right, Godfather of Soul. Then Senator Barack Obama announces his candidacy for the presidency. And of course, that's history now because he becomes the first African American elected president of the United States, 3rd sitting senator to become president. So, State of the Black Union. This is the old report, just giving you an overview of that. And I think with 20 minutes left, we'll go to your midterm. Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. Which means we might get out oily. All right. Bear in mind, the preferred answers. I make the test. Partly, I'm not trying to be oppressive, but it is faculty prerogative to define what the answers are and explain what the answers are. So most of you got this. Which Malcolm has a birthday? The reason I phrased it that way is because people have actually said to me in Eugene, Malcolm who? Martin who? Angela who? Okay.
So we, no.
Huh? Yeah, it's in there. You were missing a page.
Good?
Yeah. It's okay. But you were missing a page. That's all right. You still did good. I can't say how good. That's illegal. All right. So the name of the Negro National Anthem. Now, it's Negro National Anthem, not Black National Anthem, because when this was done, we were called Negroes. Lift every voice and sing. James Weldon Johnson. Remember the full name. James Weldon Johnson. The term African diaspora refers to the scattering of Africans all over the planet, chiefly due to chattel slavery, but not only. How can you pass the paper bag test? Be lighter in skin color than a brown paper bag. That enables you to pass for white, which sets up the next question. So these are defined by African American culture. What does it mean when someone has passed? Hold on. Old folks say that somebody's died. And if they're alive, then somebody is passing for white. Past tense. But usually it's deaf. What does it mean when somebody's passing? Usually it's passing for white when they are not white, and you know that, or they could be present tense in the process of dying. Your question?
What page am I missing?
The last one. Goes to 38. Yours only goes to 33. Anyway, yeah. So, describe what your understanding of what an ism is. System of pattern discrimination based on perceivable characteristics. Current state of Hawaii which was viciously attacked on December 7th, 41, was at the time not a state at all. Was annexed to support American interests, but still not a state. So an answer like all of the above would be wrong. First March on Washington involved what issues? Well, one, it didn't happen, but it involved discrimination in war industries. The Executive Order 8802 integrated the war industries in response to the planned March on Washington, which didn't have to happen because he signed the executive order. He should have done it anyway. But hey, I wasn't there. Executive Order 9066 ordered the military to round up more than 100,000 American citizens in the concentration camps. Why were they so dangerous? Japanese Americans who were suspected of being disloyal despite evidence. Well, there wasn't any evidence actually, but Executive Order 9095 created the Alien Property Custodian. What did it do? Allowed U.S. corporations doing business with Nazi Germany to continue to do so. Wait, they're giving aid and comfort to the enemy and profiting? By confiscating the German side of the business, but leaving the American side intact. So confiscated German and enemy property of joint American-German business enterprises and paid Americans cash for seized property. Both Bush's grandfathers received $750,000 checks from the government for Union Bank, which the government confiscated under this. That's $750,000 in 1943 dollars. Woof. So, I mean, when you think about what it takes to form a bank,
$4 or $5 million.
yeah, that's a fair piece of change to start a bank, because that was one share each. What famous car maker, whose picture graced Hitler's office, whose company made German tanks, among other things, received the highest civilian award Nazi Germany could give? Henry Ford. From the Army Air Corps' point of view, the Tuskegee Airmen were created to prove what exactly? That blacks were genetically inferior and couldn't pilot. The clear genetic inferiority of blacks to pilot is what the airmen were created to prove. On the ground, the equivalent of Tuskegee Airmen in General Patton's Third Army was the 761st Tank Battalion, also known as the Black Panthers, the original Black Panthers. The end of World War II brought the beginning of the Cold War. What was the Cold War? US versus USSR, using proxy countries as pawns in a conflict, global capitalism versus world socialism. Containment is to communism what non-proliferation is to nuclear weapons. And the United States, the Department of State decided on a unique strategy to combat communism worldwide. What or whom did it employ? Jazz musicians, some of whom were considered communists because they race mixed, ironically. Use communists to fight communists? Oh, hey. By what logic will it be possible to use jazz musicians abroad to promote the virtues of capitalism and democracy while at the same time prosecuting them for drug use while in the United States and allowing them to be subjected to legal segregation and domestic terrorism? The logic of different departments in the federal government, or more specifically, conflicting goals between the Departments of State, Justice, and the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. So, saying no logic would be wrong. It's conflicting logic. Okay, because each one of those institutions has a different rationale for doing what they're doing. That's logical, given that. Just understand, you can use logic to lie, and so I would accept exigencies of Cold War if you can define and explain exigencies, which nobody this year attempted to do. But I have accepted that as an answer if you could define. That would mean like using a dictionary, correctly using it, which I would encourage you to do. That was a challenge, but Jim Crow referred to what? American apartheid, separate but equal facilities. NAACP Legal Defense Education Fund was led by Thurgood Marshall. 22, piece of legal strategy, he decided to attack segregation and Jim Crow.
There could have been two answers for that one.
Huh?
There could have been two answers for that one.
Segregation, pretty much. The problem with English, Jim Crow society sounds like it's an organization. But Jim Crow was a policy of society, too. So, yes, I would accept either one. I think segregation is the better answer. It's cleaner. Less ambiguous. Supreme Court ordered the desegregation of educational system with all deliberate speed. Brown v. Board of Education. The woman on the Brown v. Board legal team, who later became the highest federally appointed black female judge, Constance Baker Motley. All deliberate speed, the governor of Arkansas, that's tongue-in-cheek naturally, 57, with the able assistance of the 101st Airborne Division, no more tongue-in-cheek, was forced to allow 9 black students to attend Central High School. 4 memes for race. So, you can have racial categories without discrimination, is the point. A meme is successful. Doesn't have to be true. Doesn't have to be correct.
This was a hard one.
Yes, deliberately hard, right? Because race is deliberately hard. Okay? So, the indigenous racial construct here, before 1492, was 4 races, 1 for each of the 4 directions. That is, the yellow people of the east, the black people of the south, the red people of the west, the white people of the north. There is no racial supremacy in that construct, therefore no racism. It is a legitimate meme for race. That's why the natives were welcoming of Christopher Columbus. They had heard of white people before. They were expecting the good white brother to come back because he said he was coming back. Unfortunately, they made a mistake with Columbus. I apologize on behalf of African people for Columbus's Moorish navigator. Clinton couldn't apologize for slavery. I'm apologizing for African people for bringing Columbus here. Our bad. 4 races, 4 directions is one meme. That's the indigenous one. 3 races, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid. That's the philosophical basis for white supremacy. Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid out of Europe, out of Germany, basically becomes the basis for the American the federal 5, which you had to check the box to get in here. You have to check the box, or not have to check the box, but where you check the box for employment, loans, etc., etc. 5, the federal 5 plus other, basically comes directly out of 3 races.
I always thought Mongoloid was a variation of retardation.
Yes. Copy that. Thanks.
Is that different?
No, Sir Robert Downes, observing London fetal alcohol syndrome. This is before we invented the term fetal alcohol syndrome in '78. So this is in the 19th century. He's observing white people being born with fetal alcohol syndrome features, which means they're white people with Asian features. Mm-hmm. That's where that term came from. It came out of that racial construct. That's why it's Down syndrome, right? So, Kawaida theory, 21, like the strings of the Korah. English translations of the 7 principles of blackness, etc. 7 levels of organization. 7 products of culture. Most of you got that if you answered it. What allegedly happened at Camp Van Dorn, 1,200 black soldiers massacred and buried in a dam, if you answered that. 10 elements of crash. Three reasons why white racism resembles a mental illness, and which mental illness, according to Katz. Even though you didn't name schizophrenia, I'm giving it to you. Schizophrenia, denial, blame, any 3 of those. There's 6 of them. There's more, but 6 types of isms with examples. COINTELPRO, and 2 references to Tuskegee. So COINTELPRO is counterintelligence program. Targets were a number of people, usually people of color doing civil rights or militant action. So primarily blacks, but also Native Americans and Latinos and other folks. 2 references to Tuskegee, the Tuskegee Airmen and the syphilis experiment, and how addictive drugs can be used as a weapon. Accepted a number of answers for that. And the answers that you most popularly gave, Chinese, natives, African Americans, where addictive drugs have been historically targeted as a weapon. So, yes?
I got that page right here, actually. They're right, though.
Okay.
I think I stapled it backwards. That's my fault. My bad.
You still passed. You still got an A. What do you want here?
I was making sure.
All right. So, technology by itself cannot strengthen human relationships. Cannot increase your spirituality and your wisdom, even if you do worship your cell phone. Do not. Okay? You got to do that the old-fashioned way. Create and maintain your own freedom. So know who you are. Be clear about your purpose. Be able to speak more than one language. Know the history of those you might encounter. Use your art in the service of liberating yourself and others if you're an artist or a scientist. So, griot or jolly is the word for historian, diplomat, poet, singer, actor, healer, activist. So, able to work with multiple cultures and multiple settings. They build the connections between diverse human beings and complex societies. It's a living tradition. Carry it on. You have the minimal tools to be able to do that within the readings, the book list, the movies, all the other stuff contained in class. Go forth and save the world. All right, I'm out. Here are your finals. They're up on the website now. And as I stated at the top of the broadcast, the class will be rebroadcast 10 o'clock Monday through Thursday, starting the 17th of June. Starting next week from Monday. See you later.
All right.
All right.
What class are